Folks, aren't we ashamed as men to let her set the example on time? She's a lady after my own heart on time management. The next person on the program has been a friend of mine for over 25 years, and I wasn't sure that he was going to be on the program because he has had a lot of things happen in his life over the last few months. He's lost a mother-in-law, he's lost a stepmother, he's lost a father, his daughter has been in a car accident, and he had shoulder surgery. So I am delighted to have him with us. He has worn several hats over his career. He's a retired NRCS grazing specialist, but he's been a producer throughout that entire time. I've asked him to talk about the small ruminants. Mark Kennedy from Missouri. Mark?
Thank you, Gary. I'll go ahead and get started because I know the reason Gary left me on the bottom was that was the only way to control my time sometimes. Everybody that's been around me knows I tend to talk. So I'll get right into this. My top 5 forage improvement practices, and I'd come up with some of the ones the others had, and I had to pare it down to 5, but my top one is management intensive grazing. My second one, I view the animals as harvesters, and I like to start, due to my day job as a grazing specialist, looking at what my current resources are and find the right animal to do the job. Improve soil fertility and soil health, diverse forage systems, and then stockpiling fescue for winter feed. And basically I tell everybody the reason I do what I do is because I'm cheap and lazy. And this helps me keep everything somewhat low cost and not a whole lot of labor because I'm on the road quite a bit. As I tell other folks and at my retirement party, my operation is limited in size only due to the amount of goats my wife can take care of. So I do utilize management intensive grazing, been doing that for probably close to 30 years. And I try to utilize that to manage forage quality, to meet the animals' needs, to maintain and improve my pasture condition and health. Being cheap, a lot of times I will buy a rundown farm and improve it, and then sometimes I will sell it and buy another rundown farm. So we're constantly moving. I also use it to improve utilization so I can get the most off that land. And if you're working with small ruminants in our part of the country and in this part of the country, internal parasites is one of your major problems, and grazing management is part of my parasite management. There's several reasons to use management intensive grazing. It's been spoke on, but this is a list that we came up with in Missouri that's based on producer input, feedback, the ones that's been through our grazing schools, that's put in grazing systems, feedback from them, and then the folks at the Forage Systems Research Center have done some research projects to be able to prove why we're seeing these benefits. So, in improved legume persistence, one of the first things we usually see, I like legumes because then I don't have to buy as much nitrogen fertilizer. Better manure distribution and nutrient recycling. Most of the soils where I live in southern Missouri and the Ozarks are typically pretty poor. We're looking at single-digit phosphorus levels in a lot of cases, low potassium, and generally low pHs. So as we recycle those nutrients from the grazing animal, get better distribution, we can help maintain those better phosphorus and potassium levels. Improve soil health and condition. Let me back up there. One of the things, as somebody's already mentioned, I think Robert mentioned that NRCS, one of our big buzzwords for the last few years was soil health. And I think that's one thing that we've never really talked about a lot until the last 2 or 3 years. And I do think there is a lot about soil health we don't understand, and a lot about soil health it's doing for us that we haven't ever realized. And one of those being organic matter. And, typically in Missouri, a lot of your soil tests are commonly, pasture soil tests are commonly going to be around 2% organic matter. I will say on the place I've got now, and I didn't believe, I actually sent it to 2 different universities just to make myself feel better, but I'm running 4.5% organic matter right now. So, and with that organic matter, we get some extra nitrogen out of that. We get a lot more water holding capacity that helps me into those long dry summers better. Improved pasture condition and health, and I know Dow, and I thank them for putting this on. But as we improve pasture condition and health, the uniformity of grazing, those rest periods, reduces the weed loads. You know, the best way to keep down weeds is keep a good thick pasture. Improve forage quality. Due to my day job, I was fortunate to be able to do a lot of forage testing through the GAN lab at Texas A&M, and I've got a pretty good baseline data on my place on what I expect forage quality to be on from about every 2 weeks. Increased carrying capacity as I improve my utilization, and I'm not, most of the people that you've listened to prior to me were full-time producers. I've had a day job, and even though I've retired, I picked up another, at least part-time day job that may be more time than I realized. But anyway, I've always operated on smaller acreage farms. I still want to be profitable. It doesn't have to pay my daily expenses, but I'm profitable, and one way to do that is improve the utilization of the forages I'm growing so I can run more animals. And other benefits that we've seen, extending the grazing season, grazing more days per year. It improves the livestock management because a lot of the guys, and especially where I live in southern Missouri, if you're not doing management intensive grazing, you're just running cows out there, they may go by, you know, once a week, maybe as often as they look at their cows if they do that, and by the time they find a problem, it's already too late, whereas I'm seeing mine daily. And I'll actually also, a side benefit to good grazing management is I'm seeing improved wildlife habitat, which I like to hunt, and I even like to just sit there and watch them. And it's economically and environmentally sustainable. My second point, being cheap and lazy, is finding the right animal for the job. Because I don't want to have to get on the tractor and bush hog. I don't really want to buy that much herbicide and sit on the tractor and spray. So, in buying these rundown farms like I do because they're cheaper, a lot of times I will start out with sheep and goats or whichever one's best, looking at matching the animal to what the resources are now and let them change it for you. You know, if it's mainly a weedy place, then I'll generally use sheep. Most of the places in the Ozarks is going to have a combination of weeds and a lot of woody species, buckbrush, multiflora rose, and some of those things. And that's where my goats come in. You know, if I buy a place that doesn't have any weeds and no brush or anything else, then I go with straight cattle or horses. Goats are more selective grazers than sheep, and sheep are more selective than cattle. And these diverse pastures, these that have got quite a few different weeds and brush species in them, are definitely going to favor these small ruminant animals. We heard some economics, and I'm not an economist, but I just put the pencil, and I'd done this a few years ago, and then as the price of goats went up, I had to recalculate it. And the way I've got it figured, I'm selling Buckbrush, Multiflora rose, Sericea lespedeza, and Ironweed for $800 a ton. That is the highest value legal crop in southern Missouri. And the way I come up with those numbers, it takes about 5 pounds of intake to get a pound of gain on my goats. The current kid price at the time I figured this, and they're up above that now, but this fall batch of kids, about $2 a pound. That means that feed was giving me 40 cents per pound return or for a ton of it that I put through a goat was $800. So use what you've got. My fertilization strategies, do soil test for managing, because I don't want to spend any money that I don't need to spend. I like to save money, but I do want those plants to be healthy. I do want to produce the adequate amount for my herd, and I want to avoid that excess expense. I do manage soil pH so I can maintain those legumes in there, and that's the one place I was fortunate on this place. The last one I bought, it was pretty run down, except a doctor had owned it, using it for a rent farm, and the only money he ever spent on it, if he needed to spend money at the end of the year for taxes, he put lime out, so I was fortunate. He never put any phosphorus or potassium, but he put lime out quite often. And then I established those fertility levels for adequate target species. Legumes, I really am a big fan of legumes, especially with small ruminants, and because, you know, improving the daily gains, increasing conception rates, improving forage quality, helping. I'm on endophyte infected fescue, and my ground is so steep and rocky that I'm not going to do a lot of conversion because it's just not going to be cost effective, and I'm going to tear up every piece of equipment that somebody else owns because I'm one of those guys that don't own very much equipment. It helps even out the feed supply and minimizes that need for nitrogen fertilizer. I do use native warm season grasses as well for part of my summer grazing program. And I like the warm season grasses because they give me good summer production. They help manage the fescue endophyte so I can get off of fescue when the toxicity tends to be the worst. One of the things that I've found that a lot of people don't think about when you put in some warm season grasses is it helps me manage that spring growth of cool season grasses so they don't, every acre that I've got in a warm season grass is an acre that I don't have to rotate through in April and May. And that allows me to keep my other pastures more vegetative. If I don't do any haying either, I buy my hay. Like the other gentleman said, I like to bring in other people's nutrients. That's part of my fertility program as well. But in our part of the country, it doesn't matter what you've got. Most of the guys are going to cut hay on July the 4th, somewhere in that range, you know, tall fescue. So if we can get some of them to shift to warm season grasses, cutting hay on July 4th, you're going to have a higher quality feed. The warm season grasses are more efficient utilizers of the water and the nitrogen than cool season grasses. I get some additional wildlife benefits. I'm getting good quality and animal performance. In another study I did, this was actually with stocker calves, 38% higher season-long average daily gain with warm seasons in the system as opposed to a straight cool season grass legume mix in our part of the country. The other thing that I am a big fan of is stockpiling and strip grazing, and yes, it can be done with goats and with 2 strands of polywire if you train your goats to the electric fence. And that's a whole nother deal, but there's a strip I just made, and there's, you can see that's when I was doing, those are probably daily moves, and it's about the length of the goat across my fields. So that's moving that fence just a little bit, but that really cuts my winter feeding costs down. Last winter I fed hay about 8 days, and part of those 8 days I wouldn't have had to feed hay. I still had stockpile ahead of me, but I was using the hay that I'd bought to add some fertility in some spots where I knew I had low fertility. There's the recipe we use. Now if you, in South Missouri, we figured out 40 to 60 pounds is about our break-even on nitrogen in the fall. If you go to North Missouri, you can go up where they've got deeper soil, higher productivity, we can go up to 80. But I'll stockpile so many acres every year and then start strip grazing. And I like to move mine at least every other day. I said I was cheap and lazy. Depending on what hay prices are and how much stockpile I got going into the winter, that dictates how often I move my fence. If I've got a lot of stockpile ahead of me and hay's cheap, I may move it every 2 to 3 days. But when hay gets high, stockpile quantity is low, I'll move it every day, and when I'm home on weekends, I'll move it twice a day just to improve my utilization enough that I don't have to go buy another bale of hay. And typically, 1 acre will meet the nutrient requirements of 6 to 8 mature goats for 75 to 100 days. I think the best I've done there is about 120 days on my stockpile and winter grazing. The advantage overall for stockpile grazing is reduced cost, 6 cents per goat per day versus 16 cents if I'm feeding them hay. And that's getting my hay bought cheap from a neighbor and not having any long hauling or anything. Reduced time and labor. A lot of guys will argue with me there, but I can still move polywire quicker than I can start the tractor, go get a round bale, take it and put it, either unroll it or put it in a hay feeder. And I do know, based on tests I've done in Missouri, that my stockpile quality is better than most of the hay that I can buy around me there locally. So I'm not worried about the quality, and the animals do good on it. And Gary, I think I actually got through it.